Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon and warm welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Shakra. I'm the head of MBRIF, joining you for Innovator Journeys event, where we bring you world-class innovators to talk about their journeys and what other founders could potentially learn to accelerate their growth and maximize their impact. We anticipated the session will run for around 45 minutes with 20 to 30 minutes of discussion, followed by Q&A, lasting for 15 minutes. You can type your questions in the comment space throughout, and we'll do our best to post as many of them we can with our guests today during the Q&A. So with further ado, I would like to introduce our guest today, Ambareen Musa, the founder and the CEO of Souqalmal, one of the Forbes 50 women recognized for leading the region's most successful brands. She now on a mission of revolutionizing regional financial literacy by building a multi-purpose on-demand platform. Ambreen will share her entrepreneurial journey and share in-depth insight on building disruptive innovations. Ambreen, welcome. It is our pleasure to have you and meet you. Thank you very much for freeing up yourself today to joining in this session. I know you started your business at the age of 21, and then you sold it. You moved on into corporate career. Then you started your mission to lead people and communities toward financial independence. So Souqalmal, of course, is a personal finance and insurance aggregator. So would love if you could share with us your journey and with all the audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show to start with. So journey it's funny because every year in the last 8 years, I talk about the journey. And of course, the journey is now a decade, even longer. So I'm originally from Mauritius. I was born and brought up there, did my studies there, and then eventually got the scholarship to study in Australia, in Melbourne. And when I went to Melbourne, I realized it was very, very hard for me to get a property to live in because I was in a city university, which didn't have an actual campus to live in. So I started my degree, and then on my final year, started a prop tech company, similar to Property Finder, but more for international students. So did that for a couple of years on my final year of university, sold this after 2 years. It was my first kind of experience into the startup. Having said that, I spent all my summers with my dad, and my dad has 4 or 5 businesses. He was a serial entrepreneur as such. So every summer, while the boys went off on camping and all of this, I actually worked either with my mom or my dad. So I kind of grew up in the entrepreneurial spirit. And eventually finished the startup entrepreneurial journey in Melbourne, and decided that I wanted to go into the corporate world. And one of the reasons I had to do that is because I needed a visa. I'm talking about in 2002, 2003. I needed a visa to stay in Australia if I wanted to live there for longer. So I found a job with General Electric, and I didn't want to take 10 or 12 years, which is the normal route. So I went to INSEAD, did a business school between Singapore and Fontainebleau. So INSEAD is a business school between the two countries. So I decided to do both just to get the international experience. And then it was 2007, and post INSEAD, it was a matter of I was meant to go back to London to go back to GE. And it was 2007, the Middle East was booming. It was double-digit growth. It was absolutely fantastic. And women was particularly very well demanded. It was a whole new era of women in banking and finance and whatnot. So I've lived in Australia, I lived in Asia, I lived in Europe. The only place for me, and Dubai was extremely attractive at the time. So I jumped on a plane, landed in Dubai to work for Bain & Company for a couple of years, and then eventually moved over. MasterCard asked me to come and set up their advisory service. But I do remember the first time I got to Dubai, I remember thinking, this is nuts. There are 50 banks, 250 credit cards, and there's not a single comparison site. But then with the 16-hour days, I don't know if anybody around the table knows about consulting, you're never here. You're on a plane, you live on a plane, you live out of a suitcase. Didn't have time. But on my first week at Bain, I remember I did contact my supermarket, and I said, listen, give me the technology, I'll set it up for you. But there has to be something here. There is not a single place I can compare the different credit cards and banks. So eventually, I kind of forgot about it. And then it's only when I went to MasterCard, I then fell pregnant with my first baby. and I went on maternity leave. So I had a 6 months maternity leave from MasterCard, and 6 weeks into, Rania being around, I kind of started looking. I kind of felt that my brains were going backwards, and I thought, I need to do something here. I can't do this for 6 months. And I looked again. I looked at everything that was available, and still there was no comparison site 4 years later. So I took $1,800 out of my pocket. I called a company in India, and I said, listen, money supermarket is what I want to build. Let's try it out, then set it up. I don't know whether it's going to work or not, but let's try. There has to be a reason there is no comparison site here. And I wanted to find out what that reason was. So I set it up, and within 6 months of having to go back to work, I had raised my first angel round of funding. And the rest is history. So we've done this, and then I quit my job and went into it full time. Did 3 rounds of funding, and recently got acquired by Showa Capital.
Fantastic. You mentioned in one of your interviews that it is rare for entrepreneurs to talk about the hard time they go through to build a great business. And I tend to totally agree with you, that every single day brings a new challenge, which at the same time makes entrepreneurship a very interesting and rewarding journey. So maybe it'll be great to share with the audience some of the lessons that you have learned on the journeys of building and definitely scaling your business model.
Yeah, look, it's a super interesting question. I think I've always said, the media and what you see on the media, on the newspaper, is a glorified version of entrepreneurship. And what I find is very often we forget the hard part. And while I hire, I do find a lot of people wanting to get into a startup world. And when I ask why, it's exciting. Absolutely, I don't disagree. It is extremely exciting. But I think what we shouldn't forget is it is probably the hardest experience I've ever had. And I laugh. Sometimes I say, I sometimes I go home and I see my 2 kids. Only one thing that's harder than setting up a business is having kids. I go back to the kids sometimes. I think I'm going back to work. This is way too hard. But coming back to the hardship, it's you suddenly, I think one thing people forget when they get into entrepreneurship, it is not a 9 to 5. There is a lot of work that goes into fundraising. There's a lot of work that looks after running a company when you've got people under your belt, where you're responsible for their salaries, you're responsible for their families, not just them, but their families and all of it. So the stress level, I think, of running a company lies in a few things. One is you don't actually have the admin, or when you're in a corporate world, how you have the admin area, you have the support system that you have in an admin. A very simple example, I'm looking at hiring someone. You go and do it yourself, versus you've got a full HR team until you scale up anyway. But in an early stage, whoever you were in the world of corporate, you go back and you start all over again. You do your admin, you do your coffee, you do your finances, you do all of that. So it does require a whole lot of perseverance, and I think somebody who can really go out there and get hit down and start all over again. So it's the ability to be able to pick up and go every single time, no matter how much you get hit down. I think that is one of the, I would say, the most important part of being an entrepreneur. It's the ability to get no's, and the ability to adapt, and the ability to be flexible, and the ability to feel like it's never going to work, but still go back out there and manage to focus on the vision and what you're trying to do with the business.
I was before this session, I was thinking, the business that you're in, Souqalmal, is extremely, I will say, it's the most regulated industries, and you were one of the early ones who were into fintech and insurance. So how did you manage to, evolve your product? I'm a banker. We are very much regulated. So, and the products revolves. How did you really manage that and matched it with the, market requirements?
Look, it's an excellent question. I think fintech is one of the most regulated industry, and sometimes I say, would I start something again in the financial services industry? Maybe not, because it's extremely regulated. I think it's not even the non-regulations, right? It's that we're still in a very early part of the ecosystem in this part of the world when it comes to financial services, and you've got the speed that the other parts of the world have grown, we kind of need to give us a bit of credit as well, and not consistently say we're not there yet. We're not there yet because we're still a very young country, a very young ecosystem. The first VC in this region was only 8 years ago. The first fintech, which is ourselves, we grew 10 years ago, right? So it is not a very old economy, and we're still building as we go along. And I think one thing we need to remember is the central bank has a very, very important role to play, right? And before you make decisions such as just opening the world up to fintechs, to different areas of startups that are starting up, what we have to remember, the central bank needs to keep the financial ecosystem safe, right? So when we say, this is slow, this is not happening, we still have an ecosystem built up, we do need to remember this is all done for our own sake, right? This is the financial services industry. It's not a joke. One mistake, one law that comes out and can actually have catastrophic events on the ecosystem. So at the same time, on the other hand, it's been extremely hard. But I think it's, rather than having one country from a jurisdiction perspective, the scale up on a fintech company is about scaling up in the region of any tech company. If you want to scale up, it is a regional play. It's not a local play. I think the hardest thing for us was, if we wanted to scale up in Saudi or Oman or Bahrain or Qatar, it was a whole new jurisdiction altogether, right? And not just, I need to set up a new company, I need to get a new license, which takes another 12 months. So I think the hardest part was that. And the way we played around it was very much around, let's help the regulators, let's get involved with them, let's try and explain to them what we're doing and bring the data. I remember with Sama, we even sent them, with Bahrain Central Bank, we even sent them our P&L and all our projections for the next 12 months, to show them our profitability and how we were making money. So therefore, when they were building the laws and the regulations around e-brokers in Bahrain, they understood what the levers of profitability would be. Because if you don't have a path to profitability as a business, especially in this kind of environment, it's a hard sell. So explaining to them how we made money really, really helped them come up with regulations extremely fast to help us, not just to help the ecosystem, but to also help us grow as a business, right? I think one of the areas of the central banks as well, it's not just control, but it's also to grow. So I think working very closely with the regulators and bringing those innovations slowly, step by step, does help us get places we need to be.
With those regulatory challenges, I was thinking about the future and thinking of COVID, and then now we're talking about monkeypox, and then you see the Fed is raising the rates. There's a lot of uncertainty, and governments are trying to curb the inflation while they're aiming to avoid any recession. It's not easy. It's not an easy environment for startups. It's a very tough environment. So what do you advise? I mean, you will give to the startups or founders aiming to survive or trying to have a soft landing of what they want to do today?
Look, I think we're quite in a difficult situation today, and I think let alone COVID, but geopolitically with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, with China locking down, with now India saying they're not going to send wheat out anymore, inflation rate reaching highs than it's ever been in 14 years in the US. You've got all these uncertainties and variables around the world all coming together, actually putting a whole lot of pressure on the economy. It is predicted that we're going to be going into the greatest depression we've seen in the next 6 months to 12 months. And my real message to startups or to companies looking at raising funding, a few things. One is, if you're raising funding, close it and close it fast, and rethink about the kind of requirements you need. I think your cash is a lot more important than the other items around the table. I would do that. If you're raising a higher amount, maybe break it down and close in a smaller amount very quickly. But 3 is really rethink about how you're spending your money. I think optimization and cost optimization is very, very important. And it is now to invest in product. I think in the next 6 months, it is the time to invest in product, because we are going through a very difficult time, incredibly variable. Funding is trying to dry up, and we've seen this already in the last couple of weeks. And so I think a similar story around 3 years ago when the COVID was starting was, just try and keep cash as much as you possibly can and try and ride the wave. I think we're going to go through that process again in the next couple of months. So my suggestion is if you are already doing a startup, try and optimize as much as you can. If you're thinking of a startup, it's probably not a bad place to start thinking through as the economy slows down, is think through ideas and putting things together properly and really thinking through about how you're going to go and raise funding for that new startup. And it's amazing because I saw a tweet not long ago, which I absolutely loved and made me smile, which said, there's this new term in the startup world in the US at the moment called EBITDA. I've been looking around what it means. It's not a new COVID variant. Has anybody heard about it? What is EBITDA? So, I love that tweet. I thought it was quite interesting. And it, truly enough, profitability has become, and I think that tendency to move more towards profitability started just prior to COVID. There was a discussion around it. And as we were recovering from COVID, as countries were starting up again, there was a big boost of confidence that suddenly again, funding came back out again. And you could see now it's going back. It only lasted a few months. And now you can see that, profitability and profitability is an important part. And I think long gone are the days of just burn, and we'll figure it out at some point. There is limited capital, and capital has become much more smarter than it used to be around a decade ago.
You started in 2012, and hardly anyone knew the fintech. And I've heard you today saying that if you go back in time, fintech is you're not sure if you were going to do something like this going forward. But I'm sure there are a lot of audience have high hope and thinking to get into the fintech. So where do you see this industry heading? And what are the future opportunities do you see? I would love also to know how is Souqalmal is thinking and what are they planning to build?
Absolutely. So listen, the way I think about the industry, I think the absolutely correct. If I had to start again to 2012, maybe fintech wouldn't have been my choice. But today, the ecosystem is fantastic. I think if there is any time to start a fintech company, it is now. The ecosystem has completely grown. Regulations in Sama, Bahrain, UAE, Oman, Qatar, they're really building up to cater for all the new fintechs coming. Pakistan is exploding. They're now kind of opening up the regulations around sukuk and bonds. So the fintech industry is hot at the moment, and regulatory-wise, government-wise, they're really pushing for it. So I think this is the right time to do so. Where is this going? I think it's going to continue, but I do believe there'll be a major consolidation happening in the market. You've seen, if you look at BNPL, buy now, pay later, it's exploding. We've got seven people here now. You've seen the news on Klarna, who is just firing 1,000 people. I think what's going to happen is the fintech industry is going to keep growing, but a lot more sustainably. I think right now you've got all these new fintech companies and new industries of fintech, whether it's buy now, pay later, whether it's payment gateways, whether it's peer-to-peer lending, whatever it might be. There is a lot of hype around it. And normally what happens is you have a whole lot of people that comes into the industry, everybody raises funding, everybody goes and fight for it. And at some point you will see a consolidation happening in the industry sooner or later, and which is great for the industry, by the way. I think consolidation is fantastic. You get economies of scale, you get optimization of costs and whatnot. I think it's very, very interesting to see what's going to happen in the next 3-4 years, but I do believe that it's going to get easier and easier and easier for fintech to grow into the region. What I am looking forward to is how do we, however, I think one of the biggest challenges that will stay is the unified region, right? Because you still need different licenses in different countries to set up. And I think a real scale up from one country to another would be absolutely critical for the real booming of the industry. So if I set up in the UAE, I should be able to have a license in Saudi, in Qatar, in Bahrain, and therefore my scale up is quite seamless. We'll rest to see if this could possibly happen in the next few years. But that, for me, that would be ideally the way we need to build the region as one versus smaller different markets.
And talking about Souqalmal, any trends that you guys are working on, building on?
Look, I'm incredibly excited about Souqalmal 2.0. We are moving now, we're pivoting the business We're moving much more into financial education and management. We're moving into really building up a program for corporates to give to the employees. What we've seen is productivity level is all-time low in terms of when people are stressed. There's around 60% of workforces are consistently stressed. And last year during COVID, when CEOs started calling me to build a program for them, and that's how it all kicked off, right? It's the demand for corporate financial education is actually really high. And I think COVID was a huge eye-opener for this. So from a Souqalmal perspective, we're really building up the financial education capability, which we have been, but we've never really monetized it. And we've never really, it's always been the core of the business. So we're not moving away from the core of the business, but we're structuring it in a way that it becomes an actual product for the market, for the corporates.
Great. So maybe we should just move maybe to the questions. I'm conscious of time. So let's go. There are a lot of interesting questions, a lot of engagement from the audience. So from Amir, do you think you might consider taking your business into a virtual world?
I think this is probably the most asked questions lately, whether we're going to the metaverse or not. I think we will be adapting to any changes that's coming through and adapt ourselves. But right now, for the next few months, we're going to stick to the real world. And eventually, as the metaverse and as the virtual technology gets stronger and stronger, we will then think about, the way I think about metaverse is education in the metaverse. I think it's extremely powerful to bring that kind of energy and that kind of education in the virtual world, where actually, you can learn so much in virtual world without, I think what it gives you is the anonymity in a certain way in the virtual world. I think it gives you the ability to learn without feeling compromised or without feeling the shame of I'm a 35-year-old woman and I don't know how much to spend on my rent. I should be able to, but I don't know. So I don't want to ask anyone because I'm too shameful to do so. So I'm excited about the metaverse. Is it going to be for the short term right now? No, but at a long-term perspective, we will adapt and see how it works.
Great. So we have a question from Ala. Hi, Ambareen. I remember you from Hadafi Entrepreneur Program. Great to see all this progress. What do you learn about yourself in the process, apart from the raising kids are harder than having your own business? Raising kids as a startup, actually, I see it as challenging as a startup.
I know. I have 2 startups at home already. Ala, thank you for the question. I think what it does teach you about yourself is your resilience. I don't think I knew how much resilience I had until I actually went through the business. And to be completely honest, we went through a near-death experience probably around 3 times where, ran out of cash and had to figure out what to do. And we managed to pull through every single time, which kind of brought us where we are today. But I think resilience, not taking no for an answer, and also being adaptable and having a very strong team around you is what really kind of built up Souqalmal to where it is today. And one area that a lot of people don't talk about, but being really true to your values, being true to your core. And it's always been like this. Somebody said that to me today. It's like the brand actually does stand true to what it believes in. One of the investors said, we're talking to them a couple of months ago, and one of the comments they made, which I really enjoyed, was Souqalmal has always stayed on the path of what they said they were going to do, versus being reactive. So the way we would run the businesses, and I would tell that to the team, is we'd look at competitors in the market doing ABC. And my philosophy on this was always, do not be so reactive. We've got a vision, we've got a path. Put your head down and stick to it. Be aware of what's going on around you. But at the end of the day, if you don't stick to the vision and build up what you started to build, and you forget, you become so reactive that your whole team forgets what you're building this for. There is a comment that says, customers build or buy what, they don't buy what you do, but they buy why you do it. And that comes from here. That comes from the gut. That comes from the passion you have for what you're trying to build, the problem you're trying to solve. So stick to the problem you're trying to solve versus trying to solve a problem that your competitor is trying to solve, or someone else is trying to solve, or they think they're trying to solve. And nobody ever said a competitor was better than you. Nobody ever said what the competitor was doing was better than what you're doing. You may be the right one, or there might be 2 right ways to do it. You're just targeting different markets. So one of the areas I really learned about myself was stick to your guns and understand what your core and your values are and stick to it, versus being extremely reactive onto the market. Hi, Christina. Sorry, Shakra, I can't hear you anymore somehow, but I can read.
Yeah, if you can.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
I'm back.
sorry,
I'm back.
my apologies. You know, a question from Christina. Would you recommend any tech startup founders community here in UAE worth joining?
There are quite a few, actually. There are quite a few. I think Magnet is a resource that is very good to find out a bit more about this, but there is the tech, I think there's a tech community startup. There is, I mean, it depends what you're looking for. If you want to DM me separately and or on LinkedIn, we can talk about it a bit more, but it really depends on what you're after and what you're sorting, what you're looking for. Is it investment? Is it just to meet people? Is it are you a developer that you're looking for a job? It depends what you're looking for.
Okay, we'll get to the next question from Anna. I'm interested to know, what would you do differently? Like if you go back maybe in
so
time.
Many things. So many things. I mean, I think we're still making mistakes on a daily basis. And I was actually talking about this to the team this morning. I think I would probably hire differently. We were growing so fast at some point that we just hired enormous number of people. And often we would actually hire people that was probably not as good as they should be or fit for the right job. And one thing I've learned is having a bad apple in a basket will actually rot everybody else. So I would say hire a lot more slower and be a little bit more demanding, I would say, of the hiring process, versus hiring and then realizing it doesn't work. And then when it doesn't work, it's actually difficult to let go. So definitely hiring would be something I would do a little bit differently. Yeah, but that means a whole lot more. It's a whole conversation on its own. But I think having the right people around you is absolutely key.
Very true. Okay, maybe we'll take the next question. Yeah. So we have another question. What do you think about Bitcoin?
Very interesting question. We've been talking about this a lot. As we move into financial education, we're actually building a whole section on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Personally, I have not invested in Bitcoin, and I think, and because I don't see myself as a trader, I see myself as an investor. So if I invest, it will be for the next 10 years, and I invest only cash that I actually don't need. And I am less the person who thinks I can make a quick buck fast. I think that whole concept that Bitcoin actually brought to the world, which means you can make a whole lot of money very quickly, we need to be extremely careful about this, right? And I guess the answer is I haven't spent enough time. I understand what Bitcoin is, but I haven't spent time enough to really understand the fundamentals of it for me to invest in it. I think my opinion is if you do want to invest in Bitcoin, absolutely, it's a great diversification to your portfolio. But whatever you do, make sure that you understand the projects behind it. You make sure you understand the background of it. Make sure you understand the asset backing it up. Make sure you understand how it all works. Because if you don't, highly likely you will make money, you will lose money. And if you do make money, it's probably pure luck, right? But the concept of quick buck very fast, look, nobody gets rich fast. And if you do, it's probably very much luck, or you've lost a whole lot of money before you made a whole lot of money. So I think one thing we need to be very, very careful about, and I want to keep repeating this, we are not traders. We don't sit on Bloomberg all day to know what's going on and understand the physics and the fundamentals of the market. And if you're not, then you're an investor. And when you're an investor, you do need to think about longer term perspective. If you're interested in Bitcoin, then go to a course, talk to a whole lot of people, but understand the fundamentals before you get into it.
Very true. I totally agree with you. I think we have almost reached the end of the, maybe we can take the last question. Do you think UAE will have more opportunity for startup considering what's happening at the global level? Do you think that the region will benefit? Yes.
I have been incredibly pleasantly surprised, but then it's not really a surprise about how we dealt with COVID. You've seen how the economy here, the UAE, the way they dealt with COVID. I actually bought my house a year and a half ago in the middle of COVID when I saw how the leadership handled the situation. And now you've got an influx of people, because this place is probably one of the most secure places to be. And what I have seen in the last 2 years is, if there is a crisis globally, this is where you want to be. So I actually bought my house thinking, you know what, I'm going to be here for a very long time. I'm not going anywhere. And the more you attract talent, which this region has been able to do, Dubai has attracted millions of people in the COVID area, because of the security, the safety, the stability. But what I loved most was, it wasn't the up, okay, we're in lockdown, no, we're not. It wasn't, it was done in a way where it brought a whole lot of confidence, right? And what you need as an ecosystem to build startups is capital, talent, and confidence, which I think 3 of that we've managed to do really, really well. So my answer to, will the region benefit? Yes, it will benefit, because we are now known as a very stable, secure economy to be part of. And so the more talent that comes into the country, because they want to live here from a lifestyle perspective, from a security perspective, stability, automatically you'll have more opportunities, you have more consumer market, and therefore you'll have more startups starting. Absolutely.
Well, that seems to be all we have time for today. Seriously, I would like to thank you, Ambareen, for sharing your insight, interesting stories with us, all of us today. So I would like to thank all the audience for joining us, and I hope you personally enjoyed. I enjoyed it, and I look forward I would love to announce that there will be always, we have these series, regularly. So I will request, the innovators to watch for any sessions that are coming very soon. Ambareen, thank you very much. And,
You're
I wanted
absolutely welcome.
to apologize for all the technical issues, and we'll be in touch.
Not at all. I'm hoping it wasn't on my side, but yeah, now we've learned the Wi-Fi is probably not as, as reliable as our 3G networks.
I think your mobile is doing a better job than the laptop.
It is.
Okay, until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.